Hello there. Good afternoon to many, and good morning to those in alternate time zones. My name is Bruce Mason, and welcome to our webinar, How to be Accessible, in a series of webinars that we are conducting from a testing perspective, associated with our organization Q Area and TestFort. So, with me, I have today Slava and Igor, who will be helping me as we go through this webinar. In the event that you have any questions as we go, please put these in the chat and we will cover these at the end of the webinar. In the event that we have large amounts of questions, then we'll try and cover as many as we can with the time that we've got, but we will ensure that we comment on all of them, even if we need to follow up when we post the webinar online. So thank you very much, guys, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Okay, let's make a start. Okay, Igor, can we start off with yourself and talk about what are the most common accessibility issues encountered in web and mobile applications, and how can they be prevented during development?
Hello everyone. A good question. A main issue of accessibility testing is that we have no spent a lot of time on it. So when we develop some application, mobile web software, we think about functional characteristic, some not functional, for example, performance, general usability, UI UX, but do not think about accessibility. But from the last statistic of CDC, 1 to 4 adult people have different kinds of disability. So if we think about all users, we should think about comfortable using of each of them. So first of all, we should think about our key users, not only about general scenarios. From my experience, we met such issues as, for example, missing or incorrect alternative text, alt text. If you talk about people who use screen readers, they rely on alt text. And for example, when developers named not logical or meaningful alt text, it could be confused when we when we scan screen. Also, if we talk about using external keyboard instead of mouse, we should think about how it should be used by user. For example, using tab, enter, or lowercase, and how it answer on responses of users. If we talk about in continue of a logical scanner, a lot of issue we met with different design. For example, if developer company decided to use their own design and forget about standards, for example, heading from H1 to H6. If you talk about user screen scanner, they scan and navigate during this heading according to logic. If we, for example, do not use it because of our own styles, it could be confusing for users. Also, if you talk about insufficient color contrast, the same issue if product uses their own design and do not think about standards and about final users with disabilities, for example, it could be confusing when we have different contrast ratio, for example, or non-sufficient colors, and it could be confused for user who for whom it's very important. If you talk about prevention strategies, of course, accessibility standards should be start from planning and designing any application, and we should think about standards, about area roles responsible, user component libraries that follow accessibility best practice, and of course conduct our team, developers, designers, and QA to train accessibility.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Slava, have you got any additional thoughts or comments that you'd like to add as part of that?
Surprisingly, yes. Igor provided such a detailed answer that at first I was afraid I wouldn't have anything to add. But I would just add a bit different flavor to that. So the question that you asked was about the major accessibility issues that we encounter in software.
Yes.
And the answer really depends on the perspective. Because there is a difference between the issues that are the hardest to fix. It's one category. Then we have another category of issues that just are most frequent, but not necessarily crucial. And the third thing is the issues that are most painful for people, not necessarily hardest to fix, but that make people suffer the most. So the first category, when we are talking about hard to fix, from my experience and the experience of the cross-functional teams where I worked, the most complicated accessibility issues are connected with the structure of the page. So how you write the code, how you build the HTML structure of the page on the web, what headings you use, whether you have the semantic areas like the header, footer, body, stuff like that. And also the use of adequate UI components. The thing is that what you see on the screen is not necessarily what it works like under the hood. Some element can look like tabs or let's say drop down or a table, but in reality, it could be coded in a not semantically correct way. In reality, when you explore the HTML code, these are not tabs at all. These are like buttons. Or let's say the table is made up of multiple rectangles with text inside. And those issues are really hard to fix because you actually need to rewrite your code. Talking about the most popular, like most widely spread issues, that's a different category. I've been working in the area of design for around 15 years. And I know firsthand that there is a stereotype in at least my profession that if we fix visual issues, we are done with accessibility. Color contrast, not relying on color alone, large font, and that's it. But basically, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And although these issues are widely spread, indeed, we are lacking proper semantic and logical labels on interactive components. There might be issues with colors, missing alt text. This definitely exists. But what blocks people from using software really critically and is a huge obstacle, it's again structure, responsive behavior, and the use of adequate UI components, especially for those people who heavily rely on assistive technology like screen readers. Screen reader simply is not able to interpret the interface if the interface is structured differently. It's not about colors, it's not about contrast, but about something deeper, about the way how this interface, how this program has been constructed and built. So from my experience, I would say that the main element in reaching accessibility is collaboration in the team, including collaboration between designers and developers. How we reach agreement around the use of different elements and how we translate the visual structure that a sighted person can see on the screen with the inner, invisible, under the hood logic and structure of a website or application.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you very much. And we should, although I know we're going to be covering this obviously as part of the webinar, but we should point out as well that accessibility is regulated. And as such, it is mandatory for organizations to conform to a minimum set of requirements. As I said, we will be coming on to that, as part of our webinar. But for now, thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a good start and very informative for our, viewers today. Let's move on a little bit. How do we look at automated tools and compare them with manual testing and identifying accessibility barriers and where do each shine or fall short? So what's good within, utilizing the AQA-based tools as part of accessibility testing, and the pros and cons? Slava, maybe you could kick us off on this one, please.
Yeah, of course. Testing and automated tools. So first of all, automation is always helpful, and accessibility and testing is not an exception to the rule. So of course, using different scanners or different tools that help you to build proper software, it's definitely helpful. In the design area, we have our own tools that help us avoid accessibility problems while designing the thing when it's not even implemented yet. Then, of course, for development, we have a different set of tools and testing afterwards when the software is ready and awaiting its launch. But the thing is that that automated tools do not cover everything. They are a good conversation starter. They help you focus your attention and identify the areas that require this attention. But they might not be smart enough to provide insights about something connected with meaning, with interpretation and situational accessibility. There might be situations when formally you break the rule, but in reality it doesn't hinder anyone to complete the action. And certain recommendations from WCAG and or points of the law, they do not specify how exactly you need to implement this or that functionality to make it accessible. They set the guardrails, but then you have freedom of choice within that area. And this is where automated tools, unfortunately, are not super helpful. They can identify the point of attention, but then the human being should look at that critically, compare it with, check it against the context of use, and then make a decision whether it's accessible or not. And for that purpose, there should be someone on the testing team who deeply understands the use case, the user journey, generally the purpose of this piece of software, what it's supposed to do, because then contextually you can understand if certain choice is accessible or not.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Igor, have you got anything to add as part of that?
Yes, I agree with Slava. And if you talk about automation and VS manual, of course, we should start from automation. If you talk about scanners that we could, I think, use as smoke testing. So yeah, but if you talk about more deeply, of course, automated tools, not one automated tools could not test everything from user perspective. So of course we should think about real user scenarios and create use cases for it, to add negative tests for it, to use everything that should be useful and accessible for people with a disability. For example, if you talk about tools such like using voice, for example, for navigating, we should be sure that we could use common scenarios without touching your screen on, for example, mobile, and everything is clear. It could be for error handling. For example, if something wrong with the application, this error should be loudly and clear pronounced, and users should understand what happened and what should do. Also, we should think about different kind of connection with your apps. For example, if you talk about external possibility, I mean Siri or Google Assistant, for example, we should test it too, because, for example, if main functionality is not accessible for user, as alternative tool should be useful for it. And first of all, of course, we should we should think about people who will use your application. And really, as Slava said, you should think, you should know deeply your application. You should know user expectation. Of course, we use feedbacks from users, and our checklist, our test cases should be based on it.
Okay, thank you. It's worthwhile mentioning for our audience, there are a variety of tools that are out there on the market. There is no one size fits all, where you can just push a button, it runs all the scripts, and it turns around and says whether your website is compliant or not. It's not that simple, guys, unfortunately. You do need to do additional testing alongside that. We have had some questions come in already on this particular topic, guys. We will cover them off at the end. Please don't worry, they're not going anywhere. We will make sure that we cover them. But for now, just to clarify, there is no tool that you just push a button and it magically covers everything. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Let's park that one there. We're conscious that we've got a variety of topics to cover off. So let's move on to our next topic. Igor, let's come back to you as part of this. Standards, here we go. Regulatory, one of my favorites. What are key accessibility standards in Europe, as well as UK being a Brit, and how can teams ensure compliance throughout the software development lifecycle?
Really, depending on domain, a lot of standards for accessibility are, but if you talk about more important, and we have a deadline in the end of the next month. So we talk about European Accessibility Act. So
Yes.
it was adopted in 1918 and became fully enforceable in June 2025. So it's about perceivability, operability, and accessibility for people with disabilities aligned with WCAG. So they cover different domains such as e-commerce site, banking services, transport apps, and something like that. But from QA perspective, each standards, including accessibility, is kind of requirement. So first of all, when we start QA activities, we should know how it should work and what recommendation of it. And before starting, it should be better, of course, starting with planning phase, when QA engineer starting his or her activity with planning of activities, planning of application, and could verify and validate others, rely and match on recommendation in the standards. And each of phase, starting from planning to maintenance, it should be follow these standards. And of course, QA team should launch all of this information to better cover all scenarios, and think about future customers, and control on each stage that we really make our product regarding these standards. So if we talk about general QA, so on quality control, we should control that each of the stage follow something. In this context, we should check that everything is okay on design stage, development stage, and in a release stage. So we should have accepting criteria of your apps regarding accessibility recommendation from the standards.
Okay. Slava, any comments from you that you'd like to add?
Yeah. So maybe I will skip the legal part. We all know the news about European Union finally catching up with other countries who were pioneers in making inaccessibility also illegal. But I will focus on the collaboration part. From my experience, accessibility is the team sport, the same way as UX, let's say my core competency. And it's impossible to implement accessibility properly without collaboration on all the levels. Of course, we all think immediately about developers, about designers, about QAs, but not much attention is paid to, let's say, product management, product leaders who prioritize accessibility training, who make non-functional requirements part of the requirements and refine them thoroughly. People who lead the product and predict whether they gonna need compliance or conformance with the standard in advance and plan that accordingly. Also, people making business decisions because inaccessibility is accumulating over time, and accessibility that appears not out of thin air. It just was a deliberate decision at some point to sacrifice accessibility for other gains, but then suddenly everyone discovers that accessibility is important. And basically, accessibility is highly misunderstood. And I think that the appearance of legislation is a good thing because it pushes people to think about accessibility and to care about that, even if initially it didn't ring them a bell or they thought they could just skip it. Accessibility is understood so narrowly, but it's for everyone. For some reason, there is no doubt that usability is for everyone, or that proper user experience is for everyone, or stability of software is for everyone. But accessibility suddenly is just for people with disabilities. But the disability is not always permanent. It's not always medical. There are many situations where people with acute eyesight cannot see things properly, where people with 100% hearing are not hearing the notifications from the system, and many other situations when we are not in the optimal conditions of using this or that piece of software. So embracing the diversity of such situations and and really trying to focus to keep the human in the focus can help evangelize this topic and achieve accessibility, not just because it is demanded by the government, but because this is the right thing to do.
I completely agree with that. As I say, one of the things that I suggest we do for our viewers, these regulations and everything that needs to be there are publicly available. As part of the follow-up with this, I suggest that we actually publish a link to each of the corresponding websites where it actually lists all of the standards, which we can obviously cover off. Again, as a Brit, as I know the Disability Discrimination Act, or DDA, has been around for several years in the UK. And as I say, organisations that don't follow it can be fined. My expectation is obviously the European version that's being rolled out will go down the same route. Obviously, it needs to be escalated to a governing body to be validated and checked, and then obviously they will follow up with regards to that and enforce it. But I'm very glad that it's coming through, because I agree with Slava's comments. I say websites should be accessible by all individuals without any kind of discrimination, so that say that they are accessible to all. So, okay, all right, guys. Thank you very much for that particular point. Let's move on to our next topic matter. Okay, Slava, let's come back to you as part of this one. How can involving users with disabilities in the testing process improve the accessibility of the product? I think this is a really good idea. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, that's a really interesting topic. I think that the brightest experience I've ever had of involving users with disabilities in testing was a couple of years ago as part of an educational course on accessibility that we conducted with my then colleague. And we taught students of Ukrainian Catholic University, also of the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin, and even published a video course. And as part of that activity, we contacted the local association of people with disabilities and invited blind people to our testing sessions. Although it's not official, but there is a consensus that blind people are probably the most extreme users whose assistive technology is the most demanding in terms of accessibility features. Using a screen reader can be really tough when applied to a website or an application that is highly inaccessible, and they cannot navigate properly. They are stuck in the process. So for them, it's an extremely painful experience. Of course, I don't want to narrow the problem down to just this particular use case. Of course, there is a variety of disabilities, and we should account for all of them. But in this particular case, since we had to start with something, we involved those people. Also, people with low eyesight on color blindness. And the key assistive technology that was used was screen reader. And it was extremely insightful. Our students even composed lists of recommendations and did an attempt to send that to the owners of the websites that we tested. Of course, it was an unsolicited research because those websites didn't ask for that. It just happened that we chose the most popular websites or really popular services out there on the web and tried to check how accessible they were. Business-wise, of course, I also participated in the projects targeted at improving accessibility, but in this situation, my experience was slightly different because in B2B and enterprise software environment, you don't have the entire spectrum of disabilities, because people should be qualified to do the job, and also their disabilities or the assistive technology that they have to use should be compatible with certain profession, with the requirements to do certain job. It's hard to imagine people with certain type of disability working at the job where they have to clearly see things, clearly hear things, or act really fast. So of course, we worked with those with people having such disabilities that were compatible with the nature of the job that they had to do. A couple of examples is improving the contrast level of a dashboard for people who sit in front of multiple screens every day, and they have to track multiple variables and different parameters there. Also ensuring that they have a dark mode because the strain in their eyes is extremely strong because of such type of job. Then fixing the same contrast for the mobile devices for workers in the field where sun glare can really obstruct seeing the details, and especially on the tiny screen of a smartphone. What else? I guess dyslexia is quite a widely spread type of disability. Around 10% of the US population has certain form of dyslexia, but it's not the reason for people to be discriminated and rejected from doing a certain job that requires analytical thinking, that requires deep domain knowledge. And for them, it's a real challenge to navigate an interface that is not structured properly, where the labels are confusing, and where the focus where they cannot focus on what's the most important. So in that case, these were more narrowly targeted projects and improvements. But involving people with disabilities is important. It should only be intentional. If you know what your product is supposed to do, if you know what kinds of disabilities are likely to be present in your audience, then you can kick it off more smoothly and start with fixing the most critical issues.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point. It's very, very good idea for our viewers to, where possible, engage with those people to do so. Igor, is there anything else that you'd like to add as part of that?
Too much was said by Slava, so I try to add something from my perspective and experience. Okay, my experience, feedback is everything for us. And of course, feedbacks from user could highlight more as QA team could find before this. And of course, we should follow and hear their feedbacks and to improve quality of your product in general. If you talk about our practice and perhaps recommendation, of course, if it's possible, we should invite users with different kinds of disability as beta users. So, for example, when we on the final stage of implementation of our application, we could invite such user, and it could be helpful for us, and we know that we could cover as much as possible. If you talk about authors from QA team, of course, a good practice to select correct experience or correct ability of QA engineer. For example, sometimes we have an employee who has such disability and could use this application as a real user could use. Or, for example, we could use exploratory session for this. For example, we sometimes know how application should work, but do not know everything about this. We could have several preconditions. For example, only voice functionality work on this application, and you should follow main flow using only voice, for example. Or, for example, turn on gray mode, and that's everything is clear for you, and you should follow it. But of course, if we talk about full accessibility testing, it should be used by real user with not only experience, but with their visions. So because it's too hard to become a real user.
I'm going to use an analogy for our viewers as part of this. When you are building a system, you would invite subject matter experts or SMEs to test your system because they are the ones that understand it the best. So in this particular instance, where you're looking for accessibility-based testing, it's logical that you would invite people with disabilities because they know what challenges they've faced on previous systems in the past, and they can help you iron those out. So it's just a logical, they are the SMEs that you're targeting in this particular area, just as a thought process. Yeah. Okay. Thank you again, guys. Brilliant coverage of that particular area. Let's move on to our last particular topic in this session, and then we can go to Q&As. So, okay. In this particular instance, back to Igor. What strategies or best practices within the industries can QA teams implement to integrate accessibility testing into their regular testing workflow so that it becomes kind of the norm? Yeah, it's done as part of standards.
Okay. First of all, accessibility testing should be not only one-time test. So it should be part as your regular testing process. And of course, first of all, we should set priority of all characteristic of your future application. So we need to create this plan and to put all characteristic including accessibility for your app to add acceptance criteria of it mm, to create corresponding test cases that could be improved in future regarding to user feedbacks. To understand what could be automated. Test cases are and that should be important to perform manually. And of course, we need to use regular training of QA team and follow the standards and the regulators that should be helpful for testing and to understand our future users.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Slava, anything that you'd like to add to that particular comments from Igor?
There are so many aspects. I think even 2 hours won't suffice for us to cover everything. I guess there are several things that I've seen were quite difficult for the teams to understand and implement. Even generally, why we have this conversation, why accessibility is still so hard. We have all the technology at our disposal, all the information about accessibility. It's not a secret. It's just open, and there are so many useful resources apart from WCAG, apart from legislative documents, freely available on the web. It often seems like nothing prevents you from just be accessible. But I think the biggest challenge is that accessibility is not seen as a money generator, as something that can be beneficial for the business, or at least beneficial immediately. There are multiple studies that explore the economic value of properly serving the market, of like the segment of the market represented by people with disabilities, or even more broadly, people who use assistive technology. And I think it should be already obvious to everyone. But if you develop the new product, if you are the owner of the new business, or if you lead the creation of new digital product, piece of software, website, application, anything, you have to prioritize, and you deal with so many things at the same time. You think about the sales strategy, monetization, value proposition, go to market, and accessibility, unfortunately, is not part of the of your priorities. When you have to choose what to focus your attention on, how to best spend your developers' time. It's the tough reality, maybe a bit cynical, but accessibility is rarely considered at the very beginning, and then it's often added afterwards. So I guess that awareness about accessibility can really help. There are many things that are are inherited from the initial version of the product, that you set up when you only start creating it, and then it never changes afterwards. So the more we, IT people, designers, developers, QAs, the more we know about accessibility, the better choices we can make when accessibility is not a priority yet. As a designer, you will spend the same time choosing an accessible color palette, and the same time choosing colors in an inaccessible way without sufficient contrast. As a developer, probably you will spend the same time setting up the correct HTML structure of the page versus an incorrect, or using adequate components or not adequate components.
And I think it's also worthwhile mentioning that it comes down to reputation as well. If you do a big launch of your system and it's not compliant for accessibility, you obviously run the risk of a regulatory fine, but B, at the same time, if people who do have disabilities try to use your system and they can't, then your reputation is already damaged from day one, and they may not come back. And if that word of mouth obviously spreads, that is bad PR for your company as well. So again, as you mentioned, it's worthwhile doing this from scratch because it doesn't add large amounts of time to the overall timeline, but it does add the value to obviously your end users. Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, it adds a lot of time. So let me explain. The thing is that compliance or conformity adds a lot of time because you cannot be midway in this process. You are either compliant or not. You either
But if you
follow all
design it
the
in from the start, then obviously you're already going through that process. So once it's being built, whilst it's being built, you've obviously used that as a design process for it to be incorporated. It will save on your testing time, having to do it multiple times by doing it later, which is a cost overhead, and rebuilding, which again is a cost overhead. So if you do it once, then there is a cost saving, but some people could argue
well,
obviously you've still got
if,
to obviously do the work. Yeah.
if you launch the new product, you are only spending money. It doesn't earn you anything yet, and targeting compliance from the very start means that 40% of your developers are not working on potential value generators. So it's a tough choice, and like realistically speaking, it's important to prioritize properly. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of our lovely conversation, there are certain things that are the hardest to fix. It's not everything. Adding alt text afterwards, well, it's bad that you have to add it afterwards, but it's not as painful as, let's say, restructuring all your pages because your HTML is broken. So I think that the correct approach is instead of scaring investors and the entire team about accessibility regulations from the very start, when your product is new, it's fresh, it doesn't even have users yet, but you already focus on the key NFRs, key non-functional requirements, key accessibility elements that you won't need to fix later. And you deprioritize smaller things that you will gain eventually as your product becomes more valuable, as it matures, as it gains traction and conquers the market.
That's a fair point. So effectively, the key ones that can be incorporated and provide value from day one, and then obviously grow that to a larger audience, as I say, after you've gone live. Okay, that's a fair point. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you prioritize based on, as I say, the end users that you believe will be utilizing your product. Okay, that's a good start. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, let's move on to questions. We have a couple. Again, reminders for individuals that are on our call. In the event that you have additional questions, please post them as comments and we will ask as they are speakers here on this particular area. So far, we have a couple. So the first question is asking about the automation tools. Could we provide some examples of automation tools that can be used for accessibility based testing? I'm not saying that we should provide all pros and cons because we could be here all day with regards to those particular area. But if we can provide some sample examples of AQA tools that exist within the market that we have potentially used, maybe. Slava, Igor, who would like to start on that one?
I could start.
Sure. Okay.
Um, Depending on platforms, there are different automated tools that could help you with accessibility testing. For example, if you talk about Android, it could be accessibility scanner.
Okay.
You have possibility to scan flex contracts, touch target, and label issues. Also, if you talk about check invoice, we have such tool as TalkBack. Um, If you talk about iOS, the similar tools is VoiceOver and Accessibility Inspector. Um, Also, if we talk about a more automated tool, if we could use Appium for mobile, it also have possibility to check accessibility. We talk about basic accessibility tests. If you talk about web, so we have different tools and browser extension, for example, EXO, Lighthouse, Tenon. So it's more popular, but it's only as basic elementary accessibility scanner. And as we previously discussed, so we could start with with them, yes, of course, but main focus should be on manual user scenarios, because automation tools of course have their own strengths, but of course has a limitation.
Okay. Slava, any additional comments from you on that one?
Yeah. So first of all, it's extremely easy to get lost in the variety of tools. But to be honest, I was also a bit confused when I only started learning the topic of accessibility and discovered that there is so much stuff out there. But then gradually just split them into several buckets. First of all, there are tools that help you come up with accessible solutions. These are different design plugins, design tools. When you don't have a software yet, but you get useful hints about the choices that you are about to make, about what UI component to use, or how this background works with the color of the text or an icon or something that is important for the users to perceive. So that's one thing. Those tools are quite okay, but still we are not talking about real software yet. Then the next bucket for me are tools that help you check the accessibility of the piece of software that has been already coded, including in the browser or on your smart device, like XDevTools is probably the most famous, but there are alternatives. Anyway, the idea of those tools is to test as you go. It can be the demo environment, it can be already published version, and you get instant feedback about the accessibility of that page that is currently open. And some tools are really handy in that sense that they structure all the issues. They give you the summary, certain score, so you can see if the number goes up or down over time. And they even highlight the areas, the problematic areas on the screen, like Wave tool. It shows you, okay, the problem here, problem there, so pay attention, and also the summary. And then the third bucket are the tools that help you automate the entire process and collect statistics regarding accessibility, whether you are not accidentally breaking something with the new software increments when you launch new features or fix something. And those are automated scanners. Usually you just pick the pages that they have to scan and the regularity, and they just are launched in the background. And then from time to time, you visit the dashboard with the end results and you understand how you are doing. For such tools, it's also important to have a human in control because your numbers are a good conversation starter. And depending on what type of accessibility topic we are talking about, it can be more or less accurate. But basic things like structures of pages, the use of proper UI components, color contrast, font size, what else? Area labels and things like that are easily caught by those tools.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, An additional question in a similar vein from one of our viewers. What could be some kinds of accessibility checks that could be added into an automation script? An example, native interact able HTML elements do not need tab indexes, and that could be scanned using an automation script. I know we've talked about plugin tools that can obviously utilize, as say, specific areas, but I think where this person is alluding to is actually writing additional AQA scripts themselves to effectively provide additional checks rather than, say, using third-party tools. So, guys, who might like to cover this one off?
I think we could automate all functionalities that not interactive. For example, if you talk about HTML structure, so it could be to use automation for it. For example, we could check HTML structure missing ID, for example, or according to the best standards. But if we talk about more deeply about something interaction or error messaging or different proportion of color or something like that, of course we could not use it. So if we can compare it with automation activities, I mean IP testing, for example, and UI testing. For example, it more not easy, but easier than, for example, for UI testing to create automated testing for API testing, because API more stable and not often change. But if you talk about UI, it could change very often, and it's too hard to maintain such cases. So if you talk about accessibility, of course, everything that more stable about structure we could automate. If we talk about interaction or such negative scenarios that could happen with a real user, we of course should perform manually.
Okay. Any additional comments from you there, Slava?
No.
Okay.
I should admit I haven't dealt with
Okay.
customization of such tools. We just relied on what's available on the market, and it was good enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Then let's move on to our current last, say, question. This is talking about the actual physical fines and the actual process and how it actually takes place. If my web app is non-compliant with accessibility requirements, is verification triggered only by a user complaint, or are there other processes in place? And how do authorities verify compliance before issuing a fine? My understanding on this one from the British DDA compliance is that, yes, it is by complaints from users that effectively triggers the actual physical process. And in those instances, what happens is that the company is contacted directly and they are given a specific amount of time to rectify the situation before a fine is ensued. In the event that that is not taken and that doesn't take place, then obviously the organization is fined. With regards to that EAA, I personally can't answer that one. I will defer to my say colleagues if they are aware of the situation. But that is how it works in the UK as part of DDA. Slava, Igor, are you in a position to help our viewers with regards to the process? Is it the same as in the UK or is it slightly different?
Oh, that's a great question. Although I'm based in Europe and here as well, I should say that it's hard to tell. I mean, it's just a new piece of legislation. We will see how it goes. Judging by the rest of the world, I think that the US and Canada pioneered this topic of making accessibility required by the law. in the UK as well is among the first ones to do that. I think the Gov.uk website is still among the primary examples of accessible interface and accessible design systems. So in the US, it was the precedent-based kind of process when either private persons or associations of people with disabilities were filing complaints, and then the court ruled in their favor, and mostly the background was that certain person is discriminated and cannot use a publicly available service, a website. Like there were quite a few really well-known cases against Domino's Pizza, if I'm not mistaken, Netflix, and other big names. And the basis for that was Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. It's going to be in Europe, I guess, might be similar, because just imagine scanning automatically all the digital products that are available. It will be tremendous effort and cost. So I think we can expect something similar. If your website, if your service that you provide is popular enough and it's used by thousands or millions of consumers, then there is a chance that they will complain if they encounter a strong obstacle to using that service.
I think that's a fair point. It's going to be more predominantly noticed on much larger organizations. If it's a very small localized website, then there is less chance that it's going to get picked up. But yes, from my perspective, it's all down to obviously the customers and how offended they are by the corresponding situation. Yeah. Okay. That is all the questions that I have from our audience today. So from my perspective, I would just like to thank my speakers, Slava and Igor, for their time and their input into this topical discussion point, and our audience that have been listening along with us. So thank you very much indeed for your time, everybody, and hope to see you on some additional webinars from our organizations in the future. Have a great day. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.